Welcome to Real Estate AI Flash, the podcast that helps you understand how AI is changing real estate and the strategies you can use to win. I'm your host, Rajiv Saja. In today's episode, I sit down with Chris Saxon of Nest Realty to explore what it really means to be an AI-forward real estate agent. Chris shares practical ways he's using AI to deliver better outcomes for clients, from creating hyper-local market insights and streamlining client communication to leverage AI as a personal coach that helps refine his consultations and improve his service over time. If you're looking for practical ideas to save time, make smarter decisions, and create a better client experience without losing the personal touch, this conversation is full of strategies you can apply today. Let's get to it with Chris. Welcome to another episode of Real Estate AI Flash. I can't believe we're recording this in early July, but this is airing in August. So hopefully the summer is going well for everybody. And we have Chris Saxon with Nest Realty from Charlottesville, Virginia, joining the podcast. And Chris and I hooked up at a industry event in Austin in last year. And we sort of stayed connected. And here we are. Chris is doing some cool stuff, including on his bio, he says he's AI forward. And I'm sure we'll get into all of that. And Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so glad we stayed connected. Man, I'm super grateful for all the work that you're doing and your job and your podcast job to keep us sharp, to keep us in front of all this.
Well, look, it's a village, as you know, Chris. We all need to do our part. It's a village for sure with all of this stuff going on with AI. So I barely gave you an introduction, location and broker, but so take us through, people that are watching on YouTube or listening. Love to know, get to know Chris, and how did you get into real estate, and bring us to today.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I love one thing about this career. It seems like everyone has a different path. Not a lot of majors in real estate sales in college, but I was one of those. I graduated college from UNC in Chapel Hill, 2009, and
Go Tar Heels.
10 years. Go Heels. Thank you for that. I was in healthcare consulting, so going to health systems and doing a variety of project management, advisory, software implementation, a lot on the billing side and some on the clinical side. And then, very long story short, a combination of my first child, now my oldest, was born and coming on 7 or 8 months old, and I was traveling all the time, and my wife was a de facto single mom, and I was missing time at home, and I called it my quarter life crisis. Hopefully, if the numbers shake out, that's right. And I had figured I got one shot at this to make a good change, and did a lot of soul searching and talking, and felt like doing real estate would be a great fit. And I really enjoyed the process of buying my own house and renovating it and doing all that. And mainly was really drawn to the brokerage where I am, Nest Realty, and the people and the support and mentorship program, and jumped in late 2019, got my license, and started my first sales right around when COVID started, and enjoyed all that. And here we are.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a little bit about Nest Realty for people that aren't aware, because our audience is all over the country. How many offices, how many agents, and kind of walk us through that before we dig in.
Sure. Yeah. So Nest Realty was started in the early 2000s and was started here in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is, for those who don't know, like Central Virginia. The University of Virginia is here. So this is home base, headquarters. Nest is franchised and expanded to some other markets elsewhere in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, probably a few more than I know off the top of my head, Arizona. But here in Charlottesville, we have about 55 agents. We have several hundred overall. And it's a great place. All full-time agents. Which I think is great, and yeah, I've loved being here.
Yeah, full time definitely escalates the professionalism that you provide for your clients, because obvious reasons. And viewers and listeners, if you're we're going to include all the links to in the show notes for Chris's contact information. And if you're looking for a rockstar agent in Charlottesville to help your clients, you know who to reach out to. So let's get the first question I ask, and it could be your first light bulb moment or along the way the biggest light bulb moment um, with AI. What was that for you, Chris?
Yeah, I feel like I have to break this into two moments.
Yeah.
I think, was it like November 22 when
Yeah.
ChatGPT first, came out there? I was one of the, millions of people who played around with it. I honestly, the first thing that gave me the biggest kick was really elevating the creation of bedtime stories for my kids.
Oh, yeah.
Not super applicable to the work I do now, but all of a sudden I had a good way to, figure out how to get Mickey Mouse playing golf, incorporate the Tar Heels in there, and make some good life lessons. So, but like many, it was not a workflow tool, mainly a little Google search here and there. And honestly, then for me, it was on the back burner until I remember the more specific light bulb moment that kind of got me to where I am today. And in late 2024, I had a listing representing the sellers that had been sitting on the market for a while, like a little north of 100 days, which is quite a bit in our market given this house. And we received an offer, which I thought after some negotiation, I thought we had arrived at terms that were pretty fair based on what my opinion of market value for the house was. And obviously we had some aspirational pricing to start. And I've always, if I think from my consulting background, I've tried really hard to earn trust with data. And I saw this as an opportunity. And so to articulate that this offer was good to my clients, even though emotionally it was, 5-6% below the list price, I downloaded a bunch of MLS data and was breaking it out and showing, for sold properties over the past year that have been on the market for as long as we have, what percent of the original list price are those actually closing for? The reason I did that was because the offer we had in our hand waiting for my client's signatures was, I think it was like 94% of the list price is what you could expect. And we were at 95.5. And that helped to demonstrate to them that emotionally, I know you don't love the number, but objectively it's a little above what the market tells us at this stage of the game. But what happened was that involved downloading to Excel, running a pivot table, sending some screenshots to my clients, was quite manual and not scalable and not sustainable. And then I just had this moment of being like, what about that ChatGPT thing? Can't this handle this kind of analysis more quickly for me? And then that led to me really just putting data in there. And then that, how the flywheel starts. You start asking yourself, well, what else can I do? Can it interpret these documents? Can it help articulate this? Can it do this, this, and that? And that was kind of the trigger to start asking myself, where can it help?
Wow. So, it's interesting. We've all had I've had over 130 guests. We're 130 plus now. By the time this is probably 135 episodes. Everyone's got a different take on their first light bulb moment. And there's equal number were personal and not just professional. Like in your case, kid stories, and solving a problem that you have to kind of get through that phase of growing, spending some quality time with the kids. One of my early ones was with Perplexity, building a travel itinerary.
Yes,
from
well
a mega
done.
prompt. I mean, that was one of the early ones for me, where we were like 13 of us were going to Costa Rica and putting all of the, food allergies, things you want to do, things you don't want to do, and building an agenda was like nightmarish pre-AI.
Oh,
I mean, you spend hours on Google, and that was a personal unlock. So I appreciate you sharing that. So there's several use cases that when you and I were catching up preparing for the recording, you were talking to me about the way how you've ingested two areas I want to kind of dig into and start where we want to start. One is areas you're using AI to offer better outcomes for your clients and how you build efficiencies for yourself.
Hmm.
And then maybe at the tail end, I would like to get into if I were to hire you as an agent, Chris, to buy me a home or sell a home, how are you walking in to be an AI forward agent? Your
Hmm.
pitch, because there's a lot of agents are thinking about that because clients are, unfortunately, like it or not, they're using ChatGPT and asking these questions. How do you proactively lead with that? Maybe we finish with that, but let's talk about your systems and areas and start where you want to start.
Yeah, yeah, I love that question. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is back to the data point. One thing I've always tried to do with my clients, let's take a typical buyer consult, for example.
Yeah.
I give them a buyer packet, which is sectioned off into about Chris, about Nest, about buying a home in general, about the market. So in that about the market, we have some, beautiful Nest reports. We have our monthly Realtor Association reports. We have an FA graph. These are pretty high level, static, state of the market reports. About a year or so ago, I did subscribe to Altos
Yeah,
Research, which
Outpost
gets
Research.
some
Yeah.
great. Yeah, they do. They do a great job with some more interactive, some more leading data, which is great. But that data still focuses on just the active market, and you can't quite slice it and dice it according to some of our localities and elementary school districts and price points. So, where this is all going is I feel like our market really behaves differently based on product. I mean, probably any market, right?
Yeah.
Product and location. And what I really want my clients to have is easy to understand data about what I call like their micro market,
Yeah.
right? Overall in Albemarle County where we are, yeah, we know that you see the sales price is, 500 some thousand, but, and, 20 some percent, um, go over list price. But if you're looking in this school district where they want to be, and you want 3 bedrooms plus, well, now you're looking at 56% go over list price. Days on market is 4 instead of 12. And the more that clients can just have that data, my dream would be that I'm not the gatekeeper. Like we are no longer the gatekeepers of search. If I can be less of a gatekeeper for data for my clients, then that's a win. And the point there is that that's all manual slicing and dicing until AI. And
Yeah.
now, for example, with Claude, having built a snapshot tool, when I just tell it a couple of the micro market parameters, and instantly generates a snapshot. So I've got an intake form. Clients can have that when they meet with me or right after if I get the information, and previous world, it all depends on when I can sit down or my assistant can sit down and hammer away at Excel, which is time consuming, prone to manual error, all those sort of things. So that's the first example that jumps to mind is giving
Yeah.
my clients easy to understand, more quick and accurate data about their specific part of the market.
So let's double click on that a little bit before we go to the next topic. So are you leveraging, you mentioned Claude. Are you in Claude Cowork for this primarily?
Um, I'm just getting my feet wet in co-work over the
Okay.
past few weeks. The process now is I just built it in in Claude Chat.
Yeah.
It generates an HTML and I can send out a link or print it. And then just basically I've built Claude helped build a script, and if I want to make edits, it gives me the edits to make. I make them there and test it out and go from there. But hopefully next time we talk, I'll have cowork making
And I
some of
think
these
I
updates.
think chat's fine for the specific niche use case you're doing. Where Cowork I
Mhm.
think can amplify it is you can with MCPs and people that are not familiar with MCP, it is basically the USB hub into data and tools that you have, or a spreadsheet. You can build very visually appealing dashboards that are like I have a newsletter that goes out that you actually responded to, Chris. Like that's how we sort of reconnected. So I don't go into Beehive to look at the newsletter performance. I just connected. I built a custom dashboard of the things I care about, and I just go into Cowork and it just click the button and it just builds my dashboard. 7-day open rates, 30 days, 60 days, things I care about. Like, you know. So again, it's connected to data, and you can connect it to any service that has an MCP, your Gmail, all of that. Literally, so Cowork is your true coworker, and it does things for you on your behalf. So I think chat, Cowork, and then code is literally coding stuff, which most agents aren't going to do. But Cowork is where I think you could literally build almost anything with natural language. So that's good stuff. So market data. So to create what you're creating, you're basically downloading something from the MLS, and basically you built a custom prompt in Claude Chat that you just feed it, and it just gives you what you need in the format you needed that is easy to share, right? That shrunk your time,
Yeah.
right?
Current state is my assistant will download a fairly sizable MLS export. Right now, that actually just goes on my hard drive. I just run a command through the script that Claude built, and that generates the link that I can then print and send out. But changes or tweaks to it, I run through Claude. But yeah, one of these days it'll be a nice MCP and API with MLS data and run through Cowork, and I won't lift a finger.
Yeah,
but
for
there's
sure,
a little manual work now, but light years ahead of where I was cramming pivot tables 3 years ago.
Yeah, 100%. So market analysis, great use case because AI does really well with data. So let's move to the next topic that you want to kind of feel like AI is really leveraging, giving you the leverage you need.
Well, I'd be remiss not to talk about what we spoke on the phone about with some of the integrations. I would say just over the past few weeks, I've tried to really ramp up Claude and how it's working for me, and I'm figuring out the division of labor, if you will, that makes the most sense for me between ChatGPT and Claude, which maybe we touch on later. But I think one workflow that's exciting me, benefits I think me and my clients and others, is for AI note taking and Claude and kind of the connections there. So I'm a paid subscriber to Granola, which after poking around note taking apps just seems to be absolute best in class. And so the quick use case example there is, I meet with buyer, seller clients in person. Granola is transcribing and taking notes during that meeting, which frees me up from looking down my computer, spares everyone my handwriting, missing things, stay focused on your clients. And then, right after that meeting is done, it's got the follow-ups that can then go right into an email to my clients, to my assistant, then to my dashboard if I need to run any updates. So they're just getting, they're getting much quicker, much more, comprehensive set, summaries and notes. And then, for me personally, one thing I love about that is, I will take the actual transcript from an example of a consult, give it to ChatGPT, and then ask it to give me some feedback. And the methodology that I lean on for the way I run my business and my life to some degree is ninja selling. So I've trained ChatGPT on the processes and the buyer or seller process. I can send that transcript right to ChatGPT and say, can you grade me on how I did on each of the 16 steps of the buyer process? That gives me a feedback loop, which, I have an excellent broker here, a wonderful ninja coach, and, it's not having them in the room, but that's not possible, and it would be awkward. So it's a great feedback mechanism for me to, not just rely on my clients giving me feedback or hiring me or not hiring me, but really giving some nitty gritty to make me better for next time.
Yeah. And I've been a fan of granola. I'm glad you touched on it. I've been a fan of granola for a while, individually, and then at Bright MLS, we purchased an enterprise license for granola for everybody that's attending meetings.
Oh, awesome.
So interestingly enough, there's a couple of things that you touched on. I love the feedback mechanism. I mean, even when I was my prior to granola, I was using a hardware device called Plod. It's still very good. The challenge I've had that granola solves is Plod. You got a hardware device, then click a button, syncs to your phone, generate meeting, like 3 steps of friction before you can actually get it. And granola kills all that. So I also love, and you like this, is it has an MCP connector, granola. So to me, like last week, I was in 21 meetings, Chris, right? Like after a while, I forget what I promised on which meeting that I was going to follow up on, right?
Of course.
So literally, I could go to the granola app on my Mac or Claude and say, summarize my key takeaways and things I promised to from last week. Boom, one shot, right? And I don't have to copy paste anything. And Claude can help me write the email, whatever. Or granola. So the app on the phone is awesome. The app on the Mac is awesome. So you can literally reference anything you're doing. So over time, I think since you have granola, you can connect the MCP to Claude and you can just ping it, for any questions you have.
Yeah.
Versus having to copy and paste. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, and Cowork can help you there too, because once you connect it, every meeting I have, you can have it run something automatically and give it to you as a scheduled task every morning if you want it. So there's a little bit more automation, but granola is granola for the win, for sure. So
agreed. Yeah. Thank you for the tips. Agreed.
So what else are you using AI for that is tried and true in your Chris's AI stack?
Yeah, absolutely. This one's more vague, but in thinking about this, I think where AI is just so helpful is whether it's data or thought conversations or email chains or anything, where AI is just bringing so much value to me is taking, let's call it like a raw output and turning it into something more tangible and easy to understand, or emails or to-do list or something a client can understand. So I think for example, last year I had was preparing a listing for the market, and we have a decent amount of properties here that aren't on public water and sewer. So you have a private well and septic. In preparing during our pre-list inspection, we had just a complicated septic issue going on, and met with several contractors and doing research online and checking permits. There's just a lot of information gathering that my client and I were doing. And then, that kind of culminates in us touching base and making some decisions, and just being able, I already have a project for each of my clients in ChatGPT, being able to give it all that. And then while I'm like walking around the house one night, cleaning up from, post bedtime, kids ravage and food everywhere, just speaking out loud about the situation, and then asking for it to tee up, a summary and decisions to be made, and basically an agenda to send to my client ahead of our call. And the goal, to be clear, is not to replace an important human interaction with an email, but synthesizing my work more quickly and just making that conversation more fruitful, productive, probably shorter for my client's sake. I think it's similar to data, right? I mean, you have a spreadsheet, which in the old world takes a lot of wrangling. Now I have, thoughts and scenarios and documents and estimates and pictures, and being able to synthesize it all more quickly. And then that can go for anything. If it's a price drop discussion, if it's, any of the, high stakes client conversations that you have, AI gives a, second opinion and very well trained assistant to help you prepare for those meetings.
I think the big takeaway for me as you're saying that is twofold. One is, if you've not used projects in ChatGPT or Claude, I would almost say create a project for every client you have,
Hmm. Absolutely.
especially active clients, because there's a lot
Yeah.
going on back and forth, etc. And give it all the context. The more context you give the conversation, the more personalized the output. So to your point, AI can really help personalization. And the other thing you subtly threw in there that is I want to call out, which is very valuable, is just talk to AI and give the context. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can go specific to projects and then kick off the chat button or talk voice button. And I think today, as of this recording, which I always have to say, Chris, because stuff changes in this space too
Mm-hmm.
often. And this morning, Fable 5 came back in Claude.
Saw
And,
that.
and I'm telling you, it's going to cost me a lot of money to get that. But it's free it's available for all Claude paid users till July 7th.
For a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I use the Claude plugin for PowerPoint to create
Mm-hmm.
visual decks. I use Claude from last night to now create like 10 slides for an upcoming keynote I'm doing. It's killer. And
Yeah.
Fable. I mean, Opus was good. Fable is next level. So anyway, if by the time you hear this, Fable's going to be out of the price range. So take it for what it's worth. But I think for voice to conversation AI, I think ChatGPT has probably the best voice solution today. I'm sure the other
Agreed.
ones will get there, but I've been a big ChatGPT fan for that one reason also. So before I move to my next question, give me your AI tools you pay for that give you this workflow. We touched on a few of them, Claude,
Mm-hmm.
Granola, and maybe ChatGPT also. But give me, is there anything else there that you're using that is tried and true? That
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Sure. I feel like the backbone is the $20 a month each to Claude and ChatGPT. Then Granola is in there. I believe I discovered Whisper Flow through your recommendation, which just helps with texting and emailing and all those things
yeah,
on the go. And although you miss out on some of the hilarious wrong speak to text that you get to screenshot around. So
yeah,
there's that. But the other, that's probably the backbone. But through, so Nest is a Google shop, right? So we do have Gemini and Notebook LM in there.
yeah,
I'm not claiming to be an expert, but the quick use cases for those are I've found Notebook LM to be brilliant in digesting large documents that maybe aren't the best scan quality. And top of mind for us is HOA docs and old septic and well
yeah,
permits. So being able to I actually took the same documents recently, gave it to Chat GPT, who couldn't quite read it all, then hopped over into Notebook LM, and it digested them all, and it got right to the question that my client was asking about regarding like rentals and sheds. And I was able to send that to him and save my client reading them, or control F, which might not work. And then Gemini, just the Gemini plugin for Google Drive, I think is great, because the little use case that I have is when I'm sending out a digital version of my buyer or seller packet ahead of meeting with folks. They get the hard copy, they get the digital version, but there's a lot in there, which is by design. But I'm always telling folks like, hey, you can use Gemini in your Google Drive to just query, if there's
yeah,
anything specific you want, here's the table of contents, but feel free to hit Gemini and tell me like, what is Chris going to charge me for a listing, and what's included, and what is his information, what is his 50-page CMA tell me I should list my house for.
yeah, yeah.
So I think I just love learning each of the specific strong suits that each of these tools brings to the table, and then how to better use them to better serve my clients.
For sure. I think you hit on the core tech stack that I talk to agents about. Like we talked about Whisper Flow transcription, text to speech to text, and then Granola for recording, note taking, and then the beauty of having three. I know agents don't like to have more than one tool. It like again complicates their life, but if you don't want one, you can pick one and go deep, but you're going to miss on certain elements if you truly want to be an AI fluent agent. These things do differently. Some things do really well. Like I'll give you a good example for Notebook LM. That's probably the go-to tool in Gemini. If you have a client that you recently settled with that has HOA as an example, what if you created a notebook for that client with all of the docs, share it to their Google account, and they can simply ask the question in the notebook? So I built one in my trainings. I built one for first-time home buyers. All of the questions you have for articles, like how much money. So there's a notebook you can build for all your clients. It shows how you're leveraging AI responsibly and answering the questions that they're looking for anytime they want to. So you can't really do that effectively with ChatGPT or Claude. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And Notebook LM is really good with that. So if that's a value, you need to look at embracing that. And you can literally do that in the free version, even if you don't have to subscribe to Gemini, but you're restricted to the 50 source limit versus the paid version has 300 plus sources. But Notebook LM is killer. So let me kind of shift the topic to not the final two questions I ask I want to kind of end with, we're living in an age, Chris, where clients are embracing AI as fast as real estate agents. And every conversation you go into is more and more. I saw a 1,000-watt survey that recently got released in early January that talked about how many clients, and they interviewed 1,500 buyers and sellers in all of 2025, active buyers and sellers that settled in 2025. What percentage of you used AI in the real estate process? Whatever the process, 45% said yes. Now that could be finding an agent, that could be validating what my agent told me, price, whatever it is. And I think that number is only going to steadily climb with where we're headed with AI. So how do you approach when you go into a buyer-seller consult, before the client sort of whips out their phone and kind of asks a question in your absence or whatever, how do you sort of proactively lead the conversation about responsible AI and how you bring that conversation to the table? So leave us some, and if you come to list my house, what would you say?
So part of my buyer and seller packet in the Get to Know Chris section, this is probably somewhat of a living, breathing document, but I have an FAQ about working with me, and I try to hit, what is your schedule like? How do you prefer to communicate? Some of the more personal, do you work on a team? Do I talk to you the whole time? Some of the more, personal questions that vary agent by agent. So I have a section in there about what does it mean to be AI forward, and what's your approach? I wish I had the questions right in front of me, but basically, I say I am really striving to use AI to not replace anything I do, but to elevate it, to get better responses, results, data, information to you more quickly than I could. And also, using the combination of AI and an amazing assistant to offload tasks that are more, administrative and don't bring immediate value to you. Obviously, the other part of that is that, turning that time back to, my own family. I have a handful of kids at home. So, and there's some other wording in there that basically says, there's not anything you get from AI that doesn't have my eyes on it.
Right.
And so I'm really trying to frame it that I'm responsible with it. I've got oversight on it. I'm thoughtful about the way it integrates. And, like on a lighter note, sometimes like the septic example, I sent the email to my client and I was like, obviously this is from ChatGPT. And then the first listing description I did with it, for example, I gave my clients my version, and then I gave them my version that ChatGPT modified. And I said, what do you guys think? Full disclosure. And, guess which one they picked. So, trying to be upfront about it and give your client, peace of mind for my clients is kind of my overarching goal, but give them peace of mind that, a robot is not doing the work without some human in the loop.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great way to put it. I think if you're an agent listening or watching, as Chris we wind down the podcast, I think it's imperative now in 2026 and going forward that you make a proactive statement on how you leverage AI for your clients. And I think the statement that I sort of lean back on, Chris, is that I leverage AI responsibly for better outcomes for my clients. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of overarching, but to your point, you touched on many things. So let me get to the final two questions that I finished with all my guests. So the first one is, are you a book or a podcast person, Chris?
Both.
Both. Okay. So pick one, the book or podcast that's been deeply influential in your career, more than others, that the listeners or viewers should read or listen to.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love this question. I don't know if I can narrow it down to one book, so I'll do two, but I'll make it quick. I think, you know, that the most of my headspace is consumed by real estate and my family. If I had to put it into you know, a pie chart, what's the two biggest colors? You know, serving my clients well and serving my wife and my little kids well. For real estate, Ninja Selling, a book I read a few years ago that then and everyone has different methodologies and approaches, but reading that kind of launched me into all of it, relationship-based selling, and got me a Ninja coach and gave me a framework to use AI for and to, you know, have my assistant work through. That's been the most influential book for work. And then on the personal side, for anyone that has kids under 10 or 12, a book called Good Inside. Of all the parenting podcasts and books I've tried to consume over the past 8 years since becoming a dad, that has just totally set the framework. And similar to Ninja, it gives some high level woo stuff about, you know, being a good parent, and then like real blocking and tackling things. So if I'm running my business and my parenting through the methodologies in those books, which is easier said than done, I'm doing a good job.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Ninja Selling and Good Inside. So for listeners. So final question. Is there like one piece of advice that you sort of would give your younger self, or something that you hold yourself to, personal, professional, it doesn't matter, that would help the viewers or listeners?
Yeah, I think this one probably leans more professional. And I was thinking about this. I think the one piece of advice, if I was, you know, back in 2019 and getting my license, I think I am pretty happy with the job I did with this, but I could have done better and I want to keep it going, is, you know, for realtors, it can be a lonely industry. And I think what's important is making sure you have mechanisms for feedback on a regular basis. Yeah. So that can be, you know, regular meetings with your lead broker. It can be accountability and feedback loops with other agents. It can be, you know, hiring a coach. I built a while back like a Google form to send to my clients after a transaction. I think, you know, as an Airbnb owner and operator, most everyone gives you a 5-star review, but if they have really anything they want to change, they send it via private message, which doesn't show up publicly. And, you know, the traditional tools that we have don't allow for that. So giving my clients a way, if there's anything I missed, they love, they want to change, to give me that feedback. Obviously now AI helps tremendously with this, but that'd be the piece of advice, is I would say, you know, it can be a very heads down, you know, most of us are independent contractors. You know, we don't have bosses giving us performance reviews and this and that and seeing all of our work. So find a way or ways that give you good feedback to keep your service level high and your business growing.
That is a great piece of advice. And on that note, Chris, this has been fun. I'm glad we reconnected. Looking forward to staying in touch and seeing you sometime real soon here at some industry conference.
Yeah, man. Hope to see you in Austin this year, and I'll be rocking and rolling on co-work by then. You can hold me to it.
There you go. Love it. Love to see it. Take care, Chris.
All right. Thank you.
If you found value in the show, follow it so you're notified every Wednesday when new episodes drop. Share it with someone in the industry you care for, and leave us a review, as it helps us reach more real estate professionals like you.